Portland Trailblazers, they ended up selecting Scoot Henderson. Don't get me wrong, Scoot's a talent. There's a reason why people labelled him as a generational point guard talent. At 6'2", though, Blazers, I'm disappointed in them. Really disappointed in the Blazers. I mean, to me, it was either you draft Scoot and you move on from Dame, as much as he's the franchise GOAT of that organisation. I don't think these two will coexist well and it will lead to winning basketball in any sense. Like, Dame staying, to me, hinders Scoot's growth, and then Scoot getting drafted there, it's like, how can that be any good for Dame? They'll take the ball out of each other's hands a fair bit. I think it'll be the CJ Dame type of duo again, but at the end of the day, Scoot, he's not a great shooter right now. Two undersized guards, they'll struggle defensively, especially when you got guys like Simons and Sharp at your disposal. Why wouldn't you move on from Dame and try get more assets and build with Scoot, who is this guy who's labelled as the next great point guard in the league? Yeah, so disappointing on my end. Give me your 2 cents.
I don't think we're going to hear the end of this. This is not going to be the last time we hear of the Scoot Dame trade talks, I think, or like the whole situation. I think obviously some trades take place on draft night, but I think at the end of the day, the Blazers may have had that mindset of take the best player available, because we can, if we're not going to...
Yeah, don't get me wrong, draft him.
Yeah.
But just pick between... I mean, they could still trade Dame or they could still trade Scoot.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Pelicans, they're still going to be interested in, who knows, maybe a Zion or Be Ideal could be on the way, but it's just like, I really thought it was going to be done today.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I guess with a trade of that magnitude for a player of Dame's stature, I don't think they wanted to maybe necessarily just rush into it and maybe regret the trade and not being able to get back as much that they could have got from it, because it might have felt like it might have been sort of a panic trade to try and just get him off the books or to try and get him to where he needed to be. So I think with these kind of trades that, you know, like I said, the superstars involved in, usually you probably need to take a bit more time to really hash it out and see what you can really extract from the teams that are interested in that particular player. So I think they did the right thing in drafting him, because at the end of the day, whether they decide to move on from Scoot, they can probably get something in return for Scoot, because his value is so high. Like you mentioned, he's one of the next great point guards in the league, for what he's hyped up to be, that is. But at the same time, even if you decide to trade Dame, you can extract a lot of value out of Dame and be able to then start that rebuild for Portland. You got a generational, or arguably a generational point guard in Scoot. You got Shaedon Sharp, who's, you know, his first year, even though with limited production in terms of getting in the starting lineup, getting the minutes that he probably should have been getting, he showed tremendous potential. And then if you can somehow keep Simons in there, I guess the rest of the team, that's where you're probably lacking a little bit. Outside of those guys, there are some talented players on that roster, but I don't think anything that turns the corner. So if they decide to, like I said, part ways with Dame, it'll be a full rebuild. You got some talented players coming up in next year's draft, Martis Buzelis, Isaiah Collier, but again, that's a point guard, so you probably don't need another one. But just stating that there are some very talented guys in next year's draft. Ron Holland as well. So that could, again, look at potentially fast-tracking their rebuild if they decide to part ways with Dame. But again, the fit-wise right now, if they decide to keep Dame and have Scoot, it probably doesn't make sense, because Scoot's not a really good off-the-ball player. But all in all, I can understand it from a Portland Trailblazers perspective, and obviously taking the best player available in this sense, because the trade talks can still eventuate even after a week, 2 weeks after this whole draft has settled down.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting. I think going forward for the Blazers, they have a lot of talent there, obviously, in those three guys, Scoot, Simons, now, and also Sharp too. But it'll be the most Portland thing for them to just hold on to Dame and not do anything. Really hope they don't, because I love the Blazers. I'm not a Blazers fan, but they've always had a soft spot in my heart. So I'm hoping they do the right thing and they just pick between the two, because otherwise they're going to be stuck in nowhere land.
Yeah. And that's the worst thing, like a franchise that doesn't have a direction and they sort of just like...
Middle of the pack.
It's probably the worst thing you can be in the NBA.
Exactly.
Because if you don't get to the playoffs, or if you get to the playoffs and compete, but you don't get past the first round and you're doing it for numerous amounts of years, you're actually harming yourself more as a franchise than if you just completely clean house and start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then you could, like I said, strike gold in the draft, strike gold in a couple of free agency moves, trade moves, and then again your timeline is actually shifted forward and improved quite substantially. So, prime example, my Washington Wizards, which we'll get to in a moment, but like getting rid of Bradley Beal, obviously needed to clear that contract off the books. The new front office comes into play.
Yeah.
That completely has reshaped the entire face of our franchise. So again, Portland may need to look at doing something similar, but again, in terms of the magnitude of a player that Damian Lillard is right now compared to a Brad Beal, Dame holds a lot more value. So I can understand why they'd be a bit more reluctant, a bit more hesitant, especially because he's been so loyal and he's stated numerous times that he wants to be there long term. Dame has. I can understand it from that perspective, but we'll just have to wait and see. It's not going to be the end of the debacle, I think.